Top 5 things to look forward to in Big 12 basketball next season, since the Big 12 season has come to a close. And, it was disappointing in that, the last 3 championship games, you've had at least a team in it, and 2 of the last 2, a team has won it. So for the Big 12, it's got to be disappointing not getting anybody in the Final Four, but they had 2 teams there with very reasonable opportunities, and one of them blew a lead and one of them couldn't come back and get in it. So still a great year, I would say, for the Big 12 when you get 25% of the Elite 8.
Yeah, could have been half the Final Four, though. That would have been nice. But if you're a Big 12 fan, would you rather have that streak continue or have Texas in it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, what deal with the devil do you make? Yeah.
Like, legit, would you rather, if it was the streak continues, you could say, 4 years in a row we've had a team in the Final Four and championship game, whatever, but it's Texas. 3 championships in a row, but it's Texas. Would you want that, or I think it'd be quite split.
Well, let me tell you, this is almost like having to put your heart out in front of everybody here. Here's the problem I had. I thought about that. It's a great question. Were Texas fans rooting for Baylor 2 years ago?
Oh, God, no. Not a chance.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, no.
So if you're a Baylor fan, or probably anybody else is a part of the Big 12, despite the pride of you having the conference, just because I would say most everyone was probably relieved after they were upset or beaten, by Miami.
When Kansas wins a title, everyone in the Big 12 is like, well, that's what happens. I mean, it's, but Baylor winning for Texas in particular, because that makes them pace back and forth and go, well, why can't this happen in Austin? Why is this not happening here?
Oh, believe me, 2021's tournament.
It was a
devastating night.
all the way around. Yeah. Okay, but number 5, can Rodney Terry do it on his own? I think so, but I think that's going to be, and of course, the last year of the Big 12 for Texas. But can Rodney Terry, kind of match is tough. Elite 8 is tough. It's tough to do. But can you get back and have a team that is in as much control of their own destiny as any team at Texas has been for a long time? Again, I think so. I think you're going to see a lot of good things from Rodney Terry. But the league, again, is not going to sit down and go, well, I hope they get 4 good transfers like they did before. But we'll see. Tyrese Hunter will be kind of the focal point next year because they're losing 4 or 5 seniors. And we'll see. Can they bounce back from that and either build on it, repeat it, whatever you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, sure you can. That's why they're making him the head coach, it looks like. If they didn't believe that, then they'd have gone after Calipari or Patino or whoever. I know Patino's got a job now, but could have reached out prior to that, and if they had a idea that they were probably going to not go the Rodney Terry route. But yeah, sure he can, but it's hard, man. I mean, this is a pretty special Texas team that definitely could be sitting there in the Final Four right now if just a couple of things go differently this weekend. So yeah, it's easier said than done for sure. But yeah, I absolutely believe he can do this on his own, so to speak. I mean, he had a hand in crafting the roster. He coached them for the majority of the year. The players seemed to love him. And I don't know what it was like when Chris Beard was around, because it was like the blink of an eye, basically, earlier this year. But, I don't know. I think that I'm not sure that team loves him the same way that they love Rodney Terry, given what they had gone through with him,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think he's a player's coach in the best type of way, that they clearly loved him and wanted to win for him. And I think that will only continue because that's just kind of his personality, it seems like, and his style. And they're always going to be attractive for talent and always going to have everything at their disposal that they need. So, yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think he'll be fine. Again, they had one special year. And the question is, what would they have done had that story never occurred? Rodney Terry is very much a part of some of that roster and will be even now more involved. He has to make sure he keeps the right people around him, just like anyone else does that has a lot of success. And now here's the deal. It was a fun, exciting, cute, and adorable story. Now it starts over.
Absolutely.
I think that's the good thing for him and Jerome Tang, if there's ever a positive to losing, and I don't think there's really any of them, but if there was one, it's like, okay, now expectations are still going to be weird, but they're not going to be like absurdly weird of, hey, you went to the national title game in your very first year, this is the expectation now, but it's going to be crazy for both anyways, but it really would have been insane had they gone a couple steps further.
Well, I mean, number 4, what's Jerome Tang's encore?
Yep.
You know, can he – because, look, Keontae Johnson's going to be gone. I mean, like he's going to go he's proven that he deserves at least a shot in the NBA. I know that the heart thing is going to, you know, obviously be on people's minds, but he played well through that and was fantastic. So there's, you know, like on any roster, there's going to be some rebuilding there. So what's their encore? And I do think that he got the kind of national attention that will get people that, you know, when he calls the people in the transfer portal, when he calls up recruits now, that they're going to go, hello, Coach Tang, I will come to Manhattan, Kansas. Because, believe me, you want to play for a guy like this.
Yeah, I tell you what, Kansas State, and I don't remember who the national writer was, mentioned that their social media presence on Twitter alone, and I'm sure it was elsewhere, was phenomenal. And again, he's trying to sell himself and what he's creating. And it was almost the perfect story. And just God bless him and what they did this year in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah, I'm not to try to take away from that at all, but I think everybody's social media team thrives when you're winning, like they were winning.
No,
I mean,
you're right.
Yeah,
That's a great
they
point.
definitely, you know, benefited from the winning more than anything else. But he's got a good culture that's being built. Clearly, he's beloved already there, and so is his staff and his players. And yeah, they're going to have some turnover, but I mean, any worse than what he walked into with 2 guys on scholarship and having to go fill out the rest basically? I think he could do something like that once again. I mean, the transfer portal is something he's already worked, and I'm sure will work heavy again. And, yeah, that'll be an attractive landing spot, and I'm sure they'll have more support than ever before because now people know they're already on the cusp of something, and that donation or that facility or that whatever pushes them across the finish line. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard. Even with all that being said and as much confidence as we have in him, it's going to be hard to live up to the expectations now because they're going to be out of whack. I mean, they're going to be a little out of whack because, like, that's what he did year 1. Imagine year 2, year 5, year 10, whatever. So, yeah, but I'm sure they'd much rather live up to that than be doubted and, you know, voted to finish last place in the conference. That's the kind of respect that you're looking for and you want to live up to.
Yeah. Number 3. How does Houston handle the schedule? This is what I think maybe the thing I'm most curious about for the new Big 12 in basketball. I think Houston will be very good. They'll get even better players. And Kelvin Sampson will be great. But you will not have freebie nights anymore. That's over. You're.
And here's the thing. By adding Houston to the games for all the 12.
Yeah, they've given themselves one less chance of a freebie night.
Yeah, it's just another example of less freebie nights. You now have them twice a year, or however. I don't know how they're going to do that schedule.
Well, I mean, and next year is going to be, it's 14 teams, so it'll be based on what we've gotten used to over the last decade.
No, I think they ought to play 26 conference games home and away.
Very wonky. So we'll see that. But yeah, that's something that's going to be there. And Houston getting drilled like they did too is not something I saw happening.
They had their pants taken down. I'll tell you this, I love Kelvin Sampson, what he does in basketball. I think they have a hell of a team. It just didn't work out. But what they will bring to the table, obviously, it's not that they can't beat any of the teams in the Big 12. It's having to play 3 or 4 of them in a row, with one of them a Monday or after a Saturday or whatever. And I'm sure they'll be successful, but that will be fun to watch. TCU, remember? When they joined the Big 12, the first year was okay, and then boom, they're playing nearly international championship setting because they handled it, and they did that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. I think of all the adjustments that are being made, that might be the best one, though, or the easiest one is Houston men's basketball into the Big 12, although living up to their level this year will be mightily difficult. And, you know, certainly you see, like, SMU was bad in basketball this year, so that's just something for the pack. But looking at the Big 12, like UCF wasn't very good. You know, where do they fit in this whole, like, where do they fit in the sports besides football? You know, Cincinnati was okay. They were fine. They finished in the upper third of the conference. But yeah, I mean, those are the teams that are coming along as well. But you know, certainly Houston's there at the very top. They were 17-1 in the American. That's just not going to happen in the Big 12. That's just not going to happen. So, yeah, it's going to be very curious to see how much of a juggernaut that turns into for them. But I think, like I said, they'll handle it as well as any transition of the teams coming in.
Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF were combined 1-8 against top 25 teams. They're going to have that every year. That doesn't mean they can't have success. That doesn't mean they only played 8 games. You're going to get that in the Big 12 alone. You're going to have in what could be 8 to 12 top 25 games on your schedule when you walk in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 2, who adds the most interesting transfers? Like this, in the Big 12, it's, again, I've become a bit of a transfer portal nerd, but you're going to have Baylor, Kansas, Texas, and Kansas State all trying to replace stars on the team. I mean, everybody will. Houston, throw them in there. But those 4 teams in particular, the ones that have advanced the furthest in the last couple of years.
TCU.
Yeah. Look,
Iowa State's got a lot to replace, right?
Kansas already has 2 or 3 guys in the portal they're not a shock. Look, Jalen Wilson's going to the NBA. I mean, they're going to have to replace a lot. Now, granted, they're Kansas, and Bill Self can essentially just
5 stars,
do a bird call and get some really good players out there. But it's still, again, it's tough. And again, the transfer portal makes things tougher for everybody.
And it has to be like, I thought what Texas did. Everybody, they pretty much, I think, they all clicked. They really did have a tremendous chemistry. That's not always been the case.
And that was not the case a year ago when they brought all those guys in. It took them forever to get it together. But
who has the most interesting transfers from another Big 12 program like Texas did with Tyrese Hunter or
that was a
Kevin
monster.
McCullough?
Talk about a kick in the nuts if you're Iowa
Kansas.
State. Yeah.
Those were a couple of the inter-conference transfers, and it's entirely possible we see that again.
Tech's got a couple good players that are already in that thing too.
Yeah, so I mean that's something to keep an eye on, because that was definitely something that played into the storylines heading into this past year. But I mean, Kansas is Kansas. Texas is off a great run, and now this new era with Rodney Terry. K-State obviously with Tang. Baylor's wants to bounce back post Keontae George and company.
Flagler, maybe. Who knows what happens with others?
Yeah, we don't know about the whole roster, but TCU's on a good run. Iowa State, not the way they wanted to end, but they've got a lot to like about what TJ Otzelberger's doing. And you got a couple of programs like Oak State and West Virginia that are kind of there and still, I guess, figuring some things out. Not really sure where to. I mean, they're tough outs in just regular conference play. Not sure really the trajectory of what they're on, but like Tech's got to hire a coach. I mean, who's Tech hiring, and how does he shake things up? And then Oklahoma with Porter Moser, like they gotta do something here.
Yeah.
This is the last year in the Big 12 before heading off to the SEC. But I know that their fans were not satisfied at all with what they saw this year as far as the competitive level and the end result. So, it's going to be a very interesting year for teams trying to revamp their rosters.
One note of the chat room on Houston, this is from Mansa Musa. Their travel schedule will be a lot better. Because they were all over the place, even with, they've already been to Cincinnati, UCF. They know that. There'll be a West Virginia trip, a Utah trip, but might be a lot better because it's more condensed around them.
They were just going to SMU in-state? That was it?
Yeah. Probably,
and then maybe going to Tulane down in New Orleans, so that's a plane flight. But after, Wichita State.
Memphis is not that bad. Cincinnati, Temple, Wichita State, you're talking about that. Tampa, East Carolina, Tulsa. There was some condensed. There's probably about the same. I'm not going to get into the miles.
Going to Fort Worth and Waco and Austin and Lubbock and even Norman, that's going to be way, way easier than what they were dealing with
absolutely.
before.
And number 1. Which big dog rebounds the best? And I'm glad he probably didn't have to tell him to put this, but I'm curious because Baylor and Kansas both very disappointed with their exits when they went out and not even being around for the Sweet 16 and the Final Four. That's the floor right now for those programs is the second weekend. You win 2 games. That's the floor for Kansas and has been for a long time. You win 2 games.
Yeah,
and that's the floor for Baylor now. You win 2 games, and then after that,
we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
because that's twice in a row, and they almost lost for the second consecutive year to a team that was headed to the Final Four.
Yeah.
With Creighton until, of course, the loss to San Diego State.
And again, there's no reason to hit the panic button in Waco because, again, you lost to an Elite 8 team and then a team that almost choked away the game against you and then did choke away the national championship, but just one that was on an unbelievable tear. But I'm curious to see which of these two, they might rebound the exact same way. I mean, they're roster-wise, they're built very similarly now, year in and year out, as far as player for player, where that was not always the case, or that was not ever the case. Even in Baylor's best years, Kansas is always for a long time head and shoulders above them. And now, I mean, that gap has closed quite considerably.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger uphill climb for Scott Drew than
yeah.
obviously it is for Kansas to have to reload with Bill Self. There's a lot of turnover, and we still don't even know the extent of it yet. I mean, like you say, with Adam Flagler, L.J. Cryer, or like what happens with those guys? You know, how does that work out? So until we know that, it's hard to know what to expect. But yeah, definitely a lot of questions in Waco, and yeah, there are some in Lawrence as well. But you just of course you feel better about them because they've done it time and time and time again, having to replace ultra talented teams. But yeah, it's amazing what just winning that second game will do, huh?
Yeah.
You hang that Sweet 16 banner, and it's like, all right. After that, like everything's cupcakes and cookies and extra sweetening. You get to the Sweet 16, get to hang that banner, and you feel pretty good about things. But you fall just one game short of that, and it's a failure of a year in so many ways, you know, depending on your rosters. And I think for those two in particular, yeah, they fell short of their own expectations. And that's more than fair to say.
By the way, you talk about transfer